Good evening. It's been a long time. Thanks to everybody for coming tonight and for still being here after all this time. I do apologise. There was so much going on in the background and so little that we could update you with that's just been the way it's been for the last 6 months, unfortunately. Happy Mother's Day to all of you mums out there. I hope you've had a lovely day. And to the mums who can't be with their kids and the kids who can't be with their mums, my thoughts are with you too. Before we start today, I want to say a thank you, and this is actually nothing to do with the case. I'd just like to thank the gentleman who has been working so hard to help get prepared for the new community project. He's done amazing work over the last month, so thank you to him. Okay, so to this update, I'm going to start with the article, the newspaper article at the beginning of the week, the one that said the family's fury over killer's application for parole, or whatever the thing was. And I did point out that from the parole board's own website, prisoners don't apply for parole. At the end of the punishment part, which in Luke's case was 20 years, an automatic parole hearing is set up, and decisions are made there about whether, and their only concern, supposedly at this hearing, is whether the prisoner is still a risk to the community or not. Now, one of the things that this article said was that the family was furious that he'd shown no remorse and that he'd never said sorry and all of that. And without getting into any arguments about guilt or innocence, the parole board is not there to consider remorse or apologies or anything. They're there to consider risk. And that article made no comment whatsoever on the family's concerns about perceived risk of Luke being released after 20 years. And I think the other thing that we have to think about there is it's really quite a simple one. If we have a justice system that says that is the sentence, then we have to accept that at the end of that sentence, something is going to happen. And we can't keep these people in prison forever. And I'm talking across the board here. So acting as if when that date comes up, it's shock horror. Well, first of all, we all knew that date was coming up. Secondly, and I want to make this very clear as well, the process as that hearing is coming up is that there's an organisation linked to the parole board that will contact victims and their families and tell them that this hearing is coming up and give them the option to apply to attend. So, and this is weeks and weeks in advance. So the idea that this may just have been dropped on a family out of the blue with no warning simply isn't true. That's not the way it happens. So I just thought to explain how that system works. But the reason I've started with that is this whole parole thing, it's tied to a number of things that I want to update on today. When Luke was moved back from Greenock to closed conditions, the original reasons were that he had misused the prison telecommunication system and that he'd failed 2 drug tests, both times by taking a sleeping pill. And legally, they had no grounds to move him back. First of all, the Sound of Silence series that went out on YouTube was completely legitimate. He did nothing wrong there. He was perfectly entitled to speak out about his wrongful conviction, his 20 years of maintaining innocence and the treatment he was receiving as a result of maintaining innocence. Now, I sent several previous cases in which that decision had been made. They were doing nothing wrong. I sent several of those cases, both to Luke's lawyer and to the prison. So they can't say they were unaware that he'd done nothing wrong. But that was their excuse. The other one, the 2 failed drug tests, by the prison's own rules, it's within, in order to get moved back, it's within the last 3 months. These were more than 6 months apart. So once again, by their own rules, they had no reason to move him back. So the arguments back and forward about that have been going on for several months. But here's what they've decided to do to get around them. Now, I thought I was unshockable. So I hope you're ready for this. What they've done now is they've tried to introduce a new offence, one for which Luke has never been arrested, tried, convicted, one which it is actually impossible for him to have committed at any point in the last 20 years because he's been incarcerated. But what they've done is they've tried to introduce this new offence, I'm not going to say what that offence is, on the basis of a report that's been produced by someone brought in by the prison. Luke's not allowed to see that report. He's not allowed to see what's in it. He's not allowed to see what basis they're using to try and introduce this new offence that's never happened. But that's what they want to put before the parole board to consider his risk on release. Never been accused, never been tried, never been convicted, impossible for it to have happened. And if anything like that happened prior to him being incarcerated in 2004, April 2004, they would have used it. It would have been on his record, and there's nothing. So faced with that, I don't know. I don't know how you fight that. There are certain things we can do, but that refusal to let him see the report, that refusal to let him see the so-called evidence on which they're basing this is absolutely shocking. So, like I said, that adds another layer of battle, another direction of battle that's got to be sorted out on top of everything else. And that's kind of how it's gone these last 6 months. It's been one thing on top of another, on top of another, on top of another, and they keep throwing new things into the mix. So that's as much as I can say about that today. When I can give more information on it, I will, but for now, that's as much as I can say on it. Why do we need to keep protesting? What do you think? Now, this whole thing with the parole board, I looked further into that, and parole board members are appointed by Scottish ministers. Our Lord Advocate is appointed by the First Minister. Now, we wrote to our MPs, so many of us wrote to our MPs and were told repeatedly that they can't intervene in individual cases. And yet, all of it goes right back to Scottish ministers. They're the people setting the whole thing up. They're the people appointing the people that run the various stages of it. Who puts them in their position? We do. It would appear they're answerable to nobody. Not true. They're answerable to us. And they are treating us with utter disdain. Utter disdain. We're not going to tell you. We're not going to give you answers. And yet, every bit of it goes back to them. Every bit of it. Now, I don't know if you've seen, there's a guy, I think he's on Twitter, an ex-prosecutor who is now taking up the argument that justice in Scotland, the entire justice system in Scotland itself, is not legal. Because when the powers were devolved, they were devolved to the government, to the parliament, the executive. And that means the government is in charge of every prosecution in this country. Not the justice system, the government. So again, I'm not going to mention his name just yet. I don't know where he's at, the gentleman, the former prosecutor. So I'm not going to mention his name. If I get permission, I will put that in the comments below. And you can follow him yourself. Fascinating argument. But if it's the case that this all goes back to the Scottish government and they're actually puppeteering everything and everybody, then we know who's responsible. So again, we need to keep pushing for that. I am going to ask people, once again, we're going to set up another letter writing campaign to MPs, because we need them to admit that they're behind it all. Okay, there was one other thing that I wanted to say about the process going forward, and that it's more to do with the samples and the testing and that whole process. You remember that Police Scotland way back said they would not be releasing previous results. They would only release the samples under certain conditions. They would only allow them to be tested under certain conditions. You know, this whole bunch of nonsense, just to make more hoops for us to jump through to get those samples. And then Luke's lawyers wrote to the Crown, because the police said that this instruction had come from Copfus, and Luke's lawyers wrote to Copfus, and a Freedom of Information request came back saying Copfus has said nothing of the sort. They did not tell the police to put these conditions on the samples. They did not tell the police that we would have to jump through this hoop and that hoop and that hoop and that hoop to get them. So I've got the dates here, hang on, where did I write it down? On the 14th of September, 2023, Luke's lawyers wrote to Police Scotland saying, okay, you told us this, Copfus have told us that. Now I'm going to tell you the exact wording. They said that the information given by Police Scotland was at best an error and at worst a falsehood. Now, I don't think, coming from a lawyer, you can say it any stronger than that, really. That was the 14th of September, 2023. Do you know when a response was received? Never. We're still waiting. So we've told them, once again, we've caught you red-handed in a lie. Explain yourselves. And they go, nah. We can't make them answer us. We can't make the lawyers do the stuff we need them to do. And still, we have to try and keep this pressure up. The only way we're going to do this is either to shame them into it or to put so much pressure on them that somebody somewhere caves in and says, right, okay, we'll have to look at this. Sorry, my notes are a bit mixed up. Yeah, so in terms of getting the samples, that did not turn out to be as straightforward as we'd originally hoped it would be. We knew we were going to have this difficulty with conditions being put on it and everything, but in terms of actually digging down to the samples that we would need, so that we're not accused of going on a fishing expedition. So we need to dig down to the samples, the best samples that would give us, that we think, or the scientists think, would give us the evidence that we're looking for, the new evidence that we're looking for. That went reasonably well for a period, and then a couple of things came up that suggested there might be even better samples to go for, which meant we were back to the drawing board again. And the reason for this, so I'm going to I'm going to go through a couple of cases. So without telling you what the things that came up were, I'm going to go through a couple of cases that led us in those directions. So the first was the Andy Malkinson case, when it became clear that they knew back at the beginning, or very, very early on, that there was DNA there that was not his, and they ignored it. And when it went to the commission, they too ignored it on the basis that although it wasn't Andy's, they didn't know whose it was. That's not their job. That's not their job. Their job is to say, oh, hang on, it's not this guy's DNA, therefore there's been a miscarriage of justice. The bit about whose DNA it is up to somebody else to go and sort out. So there's one argument that straight away we were like, okay, looking at the samples, there's a very strong potential argument. Next came the postmasters scandal, the Horizon scandal, and the involvement of the Scottish system in that, and the misuse of power. And I don't want to go any further than, well, let's just call it the misuse of power and all of that. And then finally, the Emma Caldwell case. And the missed opportunities, the fact that their initial decision to go after these four guys stopped them looking at anything else, and they stayed with that, and they stayed with that, and they stayed with that, while all the while this guy that they should have been looking at, they were going, not looking, we're not looking. Now we know for certain that that's exactly what happened in Luke's case. We know for certain. We are now looking at the DNA argument that they could have known back then that that was not Luke. Now, we already know that there was none of Luke's DNA there, and there was DNA of other people's. So this is a slightly different argument, slightly different take on it. And this is what I don't think a lot of people understand. Why does it take so long? Why are we still fighting to get what should be dead simple, dead obvious things? And there's your answer. The arguments change ever so slightly. The legal arguments change ever so slightly. And that creates a massive amount of extra work. Because if we go to them, I'm going to use a very technical phrase here, if we go to them half-assed, and we've not got all our I's dotted and all our T's crossed, and vice versa, they'll throw us out. They'll throw us out. We're only going to get one real good chance at this, and we need to get it right. So at the minute, there are actually a number of people involved now, experts in different fields, who are looking at things like different legal arguments, different scientific arguments, different precedents in past cases. So we do have a lot of people looking at that, but they are all volunteers. We can't afford to pay all of them. And that means they're doing it in their spare time. So again, more delays. The ones that we can afford to pay, the most important ones that we can afford to pay, we will be paying from funds raised by you guys. And I haven't said that before, simply because every time we say what we're fundraising for, the fundraisers get taken down on the basis that we're raising funds for a convicted person. Well, if we're raising funds to pay for an expert opinion, that's not for a convicted person. And indeed, as you've seen with the Andy Malkinson case, those experts' findings can have a bearing on many, many other cases as well. So that's why it's taken so long. Each time we thought we were almost there, something else came up. We had to go and hound that down. It's impossible for me to say how close we are right now. Closer than we've been is about the best I can manage right now. But that's the update as best I can give you on where we're at with that sort of thing. I want to go to what has got to have been the biggest non-story of the last 6 months, and that's the transcripts. I've been accused of going into hiding. I've been accused of lying. I've been accused of hiding. I've been accused of everything under the sun. It was the biggest non-story ever. I said in the book in 2018 that what came out at trial was not the truth, and that there were many, many other documents that proved that that wasn't the truth, and those had never been in the public domain. That's what was put in the public domain in the book. So I don't think I could have been any clearer than that. So all this nonsense surrounding the transcripts, yeah, I'm not engaging with it. I haven't engaged with it. I've got nothing to prove as far as that's concerned. Now, one of the things that came up was the cost and the difficulty of getting these transcripts, and a claim that I had lied about that. On May 23rd, 2023, the Scottish Justice Committee, which is a cross-party group looking at issues of justice, held a meeting, a discussion about the difficulty and the costs of people obtaining transcripts. And they quoted specifically the rule about having to have good reason and the courts having to agree that that was good reason. I didn't have time to put the link in. I'll put it below later. So if they were having that discussion in May 2023, what changed? And when did it change? Because I'm not thinking the Justice Committee would have been sitting there believing that this was all, really, really difficult and really expensive, but actually it wasn't. It was easy. So there's something going on there that we don't know about. So that was May 2023, and I will link the report below so that you can see it for yourselves. I acted on the advice I was given throughout. I was always told I personally can't put out the transcripts or the statements or anything like that. That's always been the legal advice to me, and that's the advice I've taken. I'm not taking the demand of some random on Facebook over the legal advice I've been given on that front. So that's where we're at with that. Now, somebody said any word on the documentary that's apparently being made. Not sure what documentary you mean, Straight Up Boxing. There have been a few approaches and there have certainly been a few discussions. That's as much as I can say. There's no apparent anything at the minute, but there are talks, as there always are, actually. We're approached quite regularly with people wanting to do something. One other thing that I really want to address, because I think it's important, and I'm going to be careful how I address this one, but I do want people to understand, and that's claims about the whistleblower who told us about the destruction of the evidence. Claims have been made that I did or didn't do certain things surrounding that person and the information that was coming my way. Now, what I'm going to tell you is nobody else was there at the time. Nobody else knew the circumstances, what the options were, what the different choices were at the time. There was one professional that I approached on a couple of occasions as things developed. But what I'm going to tell you is the idea that I did nothing or that I could have stopped the destruction of those transcripts is not true. It's not true. I've tried to explain to some people behind the scenes what the circumstances were, what the choices were, what the options were. If those people choose not to hear, there's nothing I can do about that. But it's absolutely not true that I did nothing. So I think that's important. This was a moving situation over time, and each decision was taken at each stage of that moving situation. as best we could with what we had at the time. The last thing, before I have a look at your questions, the last thing is all these claims of bullying and manipulation, all of that, from myself and from the two main groups is nonsense. I know people don't like being told no, but sometimes you have to say no for good reason. So no, we can't do it that way. Can't tell you exactly why, because right now there's stuff going on behind the scenes, but we as a group or we as individuals are not going to do it that way because it could harm the case in the future. That's not bullying. That's not manipulation. That's truth. We're not doing it that way because it could hurt the case in the future. Yeah, people are going to say what they're going to say. There's nothing we can do about that. But you know, we don't bully, we don't manipulate. And by we, I mean myself, I mean the core teams, the two big teams, the TikTok groups. We don't bully, we don't manipulate, but sometimes we say no and people don't like it. Okay, that's the way it is. Finally, I don't know how many times I have to say this. I have nothing to do with fundraising. I've got no access to the funds. I take no part in the collection of the funds. That's all taken care of the people who are not me. Okay. Right. Now then, have I covered everything? I think I've covered everything in my notes. So let's have a look at the... Oh, no, I have not. The most important one I haven't covered. 30,000 signatures. Awesome. Over 30,000 now. Why is that important? Now, I've heard people saying that the original petition was a publicity stunt and that I knew it was never going to work. I told people from the beginning, the petition alone will not be enough. The petition alone. But added to other approaches, the power of the petition is to say, this is not just a handful of us that want this looking at. There are thousands of us that want it looking at. And I made that very clear from the beginning, that the petition would be in conjunction with other things. Now that we've hit the 30,000 and people are saying, right, are you going to go back with it? Can you go back with it? We could go back with it now. We could go back with it at 35,000. Essentially, what we do now is we use the mounting numbers to shame them. So 25,000 of us enough. 25,000 of us wasn't enough. Okay, here's 30,000 of us. No, still not enough. Here's 35,000. How many times can they stand against those numbers and stick their fingers in their ears? They can't. They can't. And that's why we need you all coming out to the protests as well. We need you there in numbers to show them how many of us there are. They can't see us on social media because they don't look for us on social media, but they can see us standing on the street. They can see our banners. They can see our slogans. They can see our t-shirts. And they can see all those signatures. So please, please, please keep them going. You're fantastic. That was an amazing moment when we passed the 30,000. That was absolutely fantastic. That the two lives round about that time, so the one with Stacey and Chris and the one with Lizzie and James, I think they helped push that over the mark, as well as all the people in the groups pushing it the whole time. You're fantastic. That was amazing. And let's keep going. Let's just keep going. Let's keep putting it before them and going, there you go. There's another one and another one and another one, and shame them into it. We have, for the protest in April, Mike O'Brien's coming up again, but he's bringing with him a colleague who's been hugely involved in miscarriage of justice in Wales. So the word is not only spreading in Scotland, spreading across the UK as well. So I know it feels disheartening. I know it feels like we've kind of made all this noise and it's kind of all collapsed in itself. It hasn't. It hasn't. We need you guys to be the front line. All right. So while this work's going on behind the scenes, we need you guys out front going, we're still here. We're not going anywhere. We're still looking for answers. We need you guys doing that. And thank you to all of you who do. And those of you who are not quite sure about it yet, come and join us. They're great days, honestly. Great bunch of people. And you'll be so welcome, so well looked after. Come and join us. Now then, I'm going to have a look at your questions. 30,119 now. Excellent. Catherine Donald, Scottish Parliament do have the authority to have Luke's appeal heard according to the Scottish Justice Secretary, so why won't they do it? Because they're arguing, bizarrely, that they don't have the power to do it. And this is, it's like nailing jelly to a tree. It really is like nailing jelly to a tree. You have the power to, no, we don't. Until we need the power, and then we do. It's this that we have to hold them to account. We also need to try and get some MPs with a bit of a spine to come and join us. So keep pestering your MPs, keep going at them, because there's where we could make a real change. Who's going to be the Andy Burnham of this case? Yeah, who's going to step up and do that? Yes, the protest, this next protest is the 14th of April in Edinburgh, just outside the High Court. It's exactly 20 years on that day since they came and took Luke and he never got to go home. Exactly 20 years. Big day. It would be amazing to see as many of you as possible there on the day. Roddy, the police stated that a lot of victims in 2005 didn't get justice. Why? What was wrong with the legal system at this time? Has Luke's case been affected by this? That's exactly what I was getting at, Roddy, with when I mentioned the other cases and the other developments. When we look at some of the stuff that's coming out around that, it gives us questions that we can then take forward, which previously would just have been, again, what they call a fishing expedition. What reason have you got for asking a question like that? Well, actually, the reason we have for asking it now is look at this at the same time. And now we know they did that in another case. We have a right to ask, did it happen in this case? So that's why these emerging cases are important. What have we got? Georgie, have you talked to Russell Finlay, MSP, former investigative journalist and a decent bloke? Yes, but I've actually spoken to Russell on a number of occasions. Scott spoke to him on a number of occasions, and it would be amazing if he would take it on. I'm not entirely sure why he hasn't, because he has taken on other miscarriages of justice and stood up for them in the Scottish Parliament. So I'm not entirely sure why he won't take this one on. I don't know. Luke Mitchell petition, do not chip in. Remember and confirm email. Yes, thanks, Kathleen. When the change.org asks for a donation, it's for them. It's not for Luke's campaign. So just so that you know, it's change.org that money is going to. But after you've signed, you do have to go and check your emails and confirm. That's the point at which your signature's added, not while you're in the change.org website. Police Scotland will never admit they're wrong. That's why you guys are important. Well, I don't think they'll ever willingly admit they're wrong. But they have been backed into a corner on a number of occasions and proven to be wrong. If that's the best we can do, then that's good enough for me. If they're backed into a corner and proven to be wrong and have to go well, actually, we screwed that up, then that's good enough for me. And they're never, ever going to willingly admit it. It's not going to happen. What about Sam Polling doing an update since her last one? Again, I sort of said this before. We've tried to contact Sam, but never had any response from her. I know she's really busy. I know she puts a lot of research into the cases she does cover, and she put a lot of research into Luke's back in 2007. You never know. Maybe at some point in the future, she'll decide she would like to come back and revisit. Surely Luke's human rights are being violated regarding the so-called report being written and given to the parole board. How can they do this and not give him a copy? Michelle, that blew my mind. And I have looked into it, I have spoken to other people about it as well, like experts about it. And yes, it is. It is a complete violation of his rights. But, and here's where they get us, because here's what they know. For us to then take that to court and get it agreed that that's a human rights violation and get it sorted out takes months. And his first parole hearing has to happen very soon after the 14th of April this year. How do we get the legal action that we need taken in time to stop that before a parole board hearing? So they know that it's yet another legal argument, another route that's taken months and months and months to come full circle back to here, and then they'll throw something else in, and we'll have to do the same thing again. Is there any Scottish charities like Inside Justice who could help? Unfortunately not. Who was that? Emma McGregor. Unfortunately not. Roddy, can we no longer involve European courts since Brexit, since ours answer to no one? Well, yes, we could, Roddy, but as I just explained, that could even take years, not just months. That could actually take years. And Luke's already spent 20 years in prison. Do we say to him, all right, mate, we can take this to European court, but it's going to take 5 years? If that in the end is what we have to do, then that's what we have to do. But we're looking for domestic remedies where possible. It's designed to make it take as long as possible in every single direction. We've got all the delays with the samples and the legal shenanigans surrounding that. We've got all the delays with moving them back to closed conditions when legally they had no right to do that. We've got all the delays, excuse me, if we decide to go the human rights route with this new offence, how they can even get away with that. Yeah, so, you know, tactically, we have to make decisions, and they're not easy decisions to make. They're not easy decisions to make in any direction. And none of us, myself included, is sitting in a prison cell right now. So at the end of the day, we now have to look at what's the right thing for Luke in the circumstances. He wants to clear his name, that's for sure. But they're throwing everything they've got at him now, just to try and make it take as long as possible. Furious Traveller, I wouldn't take parole without being granted a pardon for not being guilty. For being not guilty. That's not even how it would work. In order for Luke to be recognised as not guilty, the Court of Appeal would need to overturn his conviction. Pardon's slightly different, but I see what you're saying, and that's Luke's thing. Unfortunately, once again, so he's got no say in what the parole board does. They just set up the meetings, the hearings, and they make their decisions from there. If they decide to let him out, still guilty, he can hardly say, no, I'm not going. I'm staying here till my innocence is proven. That's not an option that's open to him. Personally, I do not believe they're going to let him out on parole, still guilty. I don't believe they're going to do that. But they could, and then slap him with a gagging order to prevent him continuing to fight on the outside. That's another possibility. Once again, it's guesswork. We have no way of knowing. Will they? Won't they? Could they? We've no way of knowing. But it's in the mix. So just be aware of that as well. How is Luke? Actually, he is surprisingly well. Obviously, extremely frustrated with all these stupid games they're playing. Frustrated in that it doesn't seem to matter what we do, what approach we take. They're just stonewalling everything because they can. And I think that's the most frustrating bit, because they can. Luke's got all the arguments. He studies his case. He studies the law. He knows what his rights are and what their rights are. But what do you do when they just go, tough? So aside from that frustration, he is still in extremely good spirits, still able to laugh. And I'll tell you what, that's something I wouldn't be able to do in the circuit. I know for sure I wouldn't be able to do, but he is still able to laugh. I spoke to him, can't remember what day it was, last week, and we ended up just having a good laugh. So yeah, he's in good spirits. He's very, very strong. He is frustrated beyond belief, and I don't think anybody can blame him for that. But still strong, still resolute, and that's important. Still resolute. Where has the offence come from? Has a member of the public reported him for something? Emma, I need to be a bit careful what I say here, okay? Because I don't want this having any backlash on Luke. So I need to be a bit careful here. No, a member of the public has not reported him for anything. In fact, no person anywhere has reported him for anything. Make of that as you will. Steel toe cap slipper, is Luke safe and our fellow prisoners protecting Luke? Luke is safe. He hasn't had any sort of bother in prison for years and years, and really probably since Pullman, since the young offenders. The number of prisoners, supportive prisoners, both inside and those who've come out, is phenomenal. It's absolutely incredible. In actual fact, the number of supportive guards is phenomenal. So again, it's only from a certain level up that these issues arise. When Luke's conviction is overturned, these so-called authorities that convicted him should be held accountable. Catherine Donald, yes. And I keep saying to people, we have to deal with what is, not what should be. The chances of these authorities being held accountable after all of this are very, very, very slim indeed. If you go back to the Birmingham 6, the Guildford 4, and all of that, and the emergence of the criminal cases review commissions on the back of all of that, that was an acknowledgement that something had gone wrong. You don't say, but nobody was hauled over the coals for it. Nobody was held accountable for it. And to be honest, I can't think of a case where I've seen them actually brought to book for it. So I wouldn't be holding my breath for that. Sorry to be so negative, but I wouldn't be holding my breath for that. It will be enough for the Court of Appeal to say, yes, this conviction is unsafe, and overturn it. Sandra, can we be outside the court the day goes to his appeal? Kathleen, you can be wherever you want when the case goes to appeal. There's nothing they can do to stop you. Furious Traveller. Luke has a lot of support inside. I know my nephew, seen him loads. Yeah, he does. He does have a lot of support inside. Like I said, it only seems to be from a certain level upwards that there's a problem. Positive vibes, how's Corinne? Once again, I never really discuss, on Luke's instructions, never discuss Corinne's circumstances or health, or she's doing as well as can be expected. That's as much as I can say. Luke Mitchell's on a heading to nothing, no matter what's happening. It would appear so. Who was that? Furious Traveller. It would appear so. It seems that every time we find a way forward, they find something else to throw in to knock us off course. That's deliberate. It actually goes with the territory with cases like this. This is not the only one. You know, I've seen it in other cases, but it does make it so much more difficult. Roddy, day of protest is the anniversary of when I first met Luke. Been supporting him since not long after that. Most of my colleagues even then doubted his guilt. Yeah, I know there was a lot of talk at the time that there was a great deal of shock in the legal profession and round about it that they got guilty. The great deal of shock. So even people on the inside knew there was something wrong with this case right from the very off. And I know for talking to Roddy, people like him, that a lot of the guards were stunned. Like, how did they get a guilty on that? And for a lot of them, that's never changed. That's never changed. His clear conscience will see him through, Teresa. Well, yeah, but shouldn't have to. Never should have had to. This was a 15-year-old boy, 14 at the time of the murder. We took him away at 15. Look at what we have done to a child for 20 years. And I say we, because they do it in our names, on our behalf. And that's what we have to be aware of. While they're saying to us, we're not going to answer to you, we're not going to tell you what we're doing, yada, 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 they're doing all of that in our names. So, yeah, that's why we need to fight. Eleanor McGuffig, how much longer can they keep Luke locked up? For the rest of his life, if they so choose. His sentence was without limit of time. So if they decided, well, look at what they've done with Jeremy Bamber. You know, over the years, more and more and more evidence has come out that they got the wrong guy, but he's still in prison. I mean, I think we must be at the 40-year mark for Jeremy Bamber now. So, yeah, they could. If they so choose, they could. Has Scott Forbes given up the fight? Oliver, not to my knowledge. He has, well, the last I saw, he had stepped down from the campaign, if you like. Not that it was ever a part of the campaign as such. He didn't like all that side of things. But last I saw was that he was no longer campaigning, he was no longer working on the case, but would continue to be supportive. Unfortunately, I haven't spoken to Scott in some time, so I don't really know what his position is. Sandra, when they say they, And when we see multiple organizations involved in the system, who do we think can possibly be orchestrating this treatment, incarceration? What part of the system? United States, that's a very, very, very interesting question. And I don't know the answer. I don't know the answer. I know that the prisoners at sort of ordinary level are torn because they're following orders, but at the same time believing that Luke shouldn't be there. The levels above that, I don't know if you've got the just following orders thing throughout the system. Actually, where everybody just toes the party line. But somebody has to be right in the party line. You're correct. Somebody has to be right in the party line. Who is that? Or which organisation is that? And why? That would have to be pure speculation, unfortunately. But when you find, for example, Police Scotland saying that Cockfus gave them a direct instruction and Cockfus came back and said, we did nothing of the sort, you've kind of got to start asking questions about who's calling the shots here and at what level. Margaret Pringle, has any member that was on the jury ever contacted you? No, Margaret, that would actually be, it's very, very difficult. Excuse me. Excuse me. We are not allowed to approach jury members at all. They can approach us, but they can't discuss what was discussed in the jury room. So they've got them kind of both ways there. We had a conversation about juries once previously along these lines, saying we can't approach them, they can approach us, but they can't discuss what was discussed in the jury room. And the following day, the media were claiming that we were encouraging jurors to come and talk to us, and that was an offence, and yada, yada, yada. So we now have to be really, really careful every time this conversation comes up to say to people, yes, we're not allowed to do that, they're not allowed to do this. So it is a difficult one. Chumba, happy Mother's Day to all. Thank you. Kathleen, the fact that they're coming up with another hurdle, does that mean he could be detained longer? And do you know how long for? Just about anything means he could be detained for longer. And no, we'd have no idea how long. None. Because the sentence was without limit of time. They don't even need a reason to keep him for longer. The parole board could just say, I think he could still be a risk, and that's it. Another 2 years. Positive vibes. Thought once a case was over, they can talk to anybody about anything. If you're talking about jurors, positive vibes, absolutely not in this country. Absolutely not. Not allowed. Margaret Pringle, I wonder how many now wish they could turn back the clock. Do you know, I was speaking to somebody about that either yesterday or today and saying, if I'd been on a jury and convicted on what I was told was all of the evidence, and found out later there was all this evidence that I hadn't heard, but that conviction would still stand, I'd be devastated. I'd be absolutely devastated that I put somebody away on what I believed to be the truth, to then find out that the system itself hid that truth from me as a juror while asking me to decide on somebody's fate. I'd be absolutely devastated. Roddy, years from now, people will look back at this and will be asking, how did they get away with this utter corruption? Why did the people let them get away with it? Sad, isn't it? Because we are the people. Luke Mitchell and Jodie Jones, who got justice? We can't blame the jury on this. No, we can't. We can't. They were lied to as well. They were misled as well. Has Angela Constance said anything about this case? Kizzy Wiz, not yet. Not yet. That could still be on the cards. Chumba, he was never a risk. Exactly. How do you assess the risk of someone who was never a risk in the first place? What about the confession? Has that never been classed as new evidence? Once again, Emma, there are two parts to this. The first is that the claimed confession, the one for which we had a letter, was given to Luke's lawyers, who never did anything with it to our knowledge. The second alleged confession, we have nothing to support that confession ever happened. So in both cases, well, certainly in the first one, the one that was sent to Luke's lawyers, yeah, his lawyers failed him there. Simple as that. His lawyers failed him there. How many times over the years have his lawyers failed him? And what do you do if you're inside and you're relying on your lawyers to do what you're asking them to do what you're telling them to do, and they don't do it? What then? What then? You're stuck with it, and you're stuck with the consequences of that. Sarah Spence, it's a shame there's no law for a jury to withdraw their vote based on false evidence. Indeed, Sarah. Yeah, that would change things up a bit, wouldn't it? Emma McGregor, his lawyers didn't use it. Do they know who made the confession? Yes. Yes, they knew at the time and did nothing with it. Yeah, Luke Mitchell and Jodie Jones, who got justice. We can't even trust lawyers. Never. Never. Nope. And when people come to me at the beginning of cases, that's the first thing I tell them. Do not leave this to your lawyers. Don't trust them to do the right thing for you. That's not how it works. Don't do it. You need to take control of your case. And you need to make sure they do what you need them to do. And that's no easy feat. Has anyone approached Professor David Wilson and asked his opinions on this case? Big name in broadcasting could be the breakthrough. He asked difficult questions on the system. Yes, Professor Wilson has actually commented on the case, and he has said he doesn't know how this case even got to trial, far less to conviction. He has not taken it on as a case that he's willing to study in his own right, and I totally understand that. I know how much work one of these cases takes. If you're working on 2 or 3, that is your every hour taken up at that. So I do understand that. Again, there is the potential to maybe work with Professor Wilson in the future, but for now, that's not on the cards. Could Luke sue them if he ever gets out? Would depend on the circumstances. Who's that, Mama Bay? It would depend on the circumstances. And again, there are so many obstacles, so many blocks to that as well. Sorry, Kathleen, will it help if Margaret Caldwell and her lawyers get the inquest into her daughter's case and shows police corruption at the top of the chain? It may do. It may do, particularly if certain names were to crop up in various places. But then again, we might get the argument it's a different police force at a different time. Just it's nothing to say because it happened in one, it happened in another, which is the most likely argument that we'll get. Georgina McRoberts, Luke was never a risk, he was only a scapegoat. Absolutely. Eleanor, it will be one big party in Scotland when Luke's released. Well, yeah, for those of us who believe that he did not do this, yes, there will be many who will not be so happy to see that outcome. And I really don't understand why. You know, if there's no evidence that it was him and there's evidence pointing to other people, why would even those who are convinced they got the right guy, why would they not want that evidence re-examined? Just to be sure, just to be absolutely sure. But they don't, and I don't understand it. Leah K, there's no DNA, yeah. Yeah, I think a lot of people find that really, really difficult to understand. There is no DNA from him on Jodie at the crime scene, none from the crime scene or Jodie on him in his house, in his mum's cars, in his mum's business, nowhere, nothing. And that, I believe, is why the Crown didn't found the case on DNA, because there was none. They could never have got a conviction on that basis, because there was none. Right, I've been here just over an hour. Are we done with questions? Emma McGregor, do the swabs from the Bowie knife found in the skip still exist? Yes, they do. Certainly on paper. Yes, they do. Steel toe cap slipper. Can we ask for Luke to be moved to Cat C under the circumstances because he's innocent? Must be affected. No, we can't. Unfortunately, it's not up to us. But they would just ignore us. They would just ignore us. Thank you, Kathleen. I couldn't remember the name of the guy that was doing the stuff on the Lord Advocate and the conflict interest. Silver Fox podcasts, people, go have a look for them. Some really interesting stuff on there on the Scottish justice system, the legality of it, the conflict of interest. The Lord Advocate is married to the guy that convicted Luke, that prosecuted Luke, and they try to say there's no conflict of interest there. Sure. John, do they know what productions are left? Yes. Yes. Full list of them, which we have once again had confirmed are still in existence and have not been, nothing's been done to them apart from them being moved. Vanda, I just don't know how I would cope if this was my child. Neither do I. Neither do I. I have no idea how mums like Corinne keep going, and I know a lot of them, and they do. I have no idea where they get their strength from. I really don't. Luke and Corinne passed lie detector, yet no one has said anything. Well, yeah. Yeah, because lie detectors are not admissible in court. There seems to be this complete dismissal of them, and yet they were rolled out for sex offenders in this country. I'm not talking about the States here, I'm talking about the UK. They were rolled out for sex offenders at liberty. So they would lie detect them after they'd been released to make sure they were still safe to be in the community. There was an MP, a guy called John Lamont, way back in the day, just after the lie detectors. He had been screaming for these lie detectors to be rolled out across the country for sex offenders to prove that they were safe to be at liberty. And then when Luke's lie detector came out and we put it on YouTube, he starts screaming for a parliamentary question on why we were allowed to put that out and why he was even allowed to take one in the first place. So it would seem Scottish MPs are happy to use lie detectors to prove guilt, but claim that they don't work when they come to proving innocence or supporting, sorry, not proving, supporting guilt and supporting innocence. They're happy to accept them when they support a claim of guilt, and they think they should be banned outright if they support a claim of innocence. Looking for some consistency in there, not finding any. Right, are we done? Do you know where the samples are? Yes. Emma, sorry, who was that? Emma. Yes. Yes, we do. We shall be there to support the protest on the 14th of April. Thank you, Kathleen. I hope to see all of you there on the 14th of April. It will be obviously a sad day, but I think it will be an amazing protest, and it would be really good to see as many as possible turning out on the day. It really would. And like I said, you will be so welcome. You'll be very, very well looked after. Great crowd. There's never ever any trouble. There's never any hassles or anything like that. So I'm looking forward to seeing you all there. Maxine Sutherland, I would love to see a few others do a lie detector as well. Well, I'm not going to comment on that one. Kizzy was Lamont as a Tory. Yes, he was back then too. Yeah. Right, I think we're done. I think we're done for tonight. Thank you all for coming out tonight. Oh yeah, sans the tablet lady. If you come to the protest on the 14th, you get to meet Sans and taste her tablet, and I'm telling you, it's worth coming just for that. Just for the tablet. It's fabulous. Okay, I'm gonna go. Thank you, everybody, for turning out. Thank you, everybody who signed and shared the petition. Let's keep those numbers rising. Let's keep them going. And I will see you all on the 14th of April, 12:30 for 1 o'clock outside the High Court in Edinburgh. If there are any other updates between now and then, I will do another live, assuming there are no big updates between now and then. I'll see you on the 14th. Thanks, everybody. See you soon. Bye-bye.